So, to present the first paper, we have Mr. Naveen and Mr. Manu from SAP, and they'll be presenting on reusable centralized web element repository for automation tools. Over to you.
Hi Gorika, hope you can see my screen. Hello,
Please go ahead.
hope I was audible.
So, yes, Mr. Naveen, we can see your screen. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Hello and welcome everyone. So myself Naveen from SAP Labs India. Before starting the presentation, quick introduction about our team. So we are a team of automation expert working on different topic of automation from past few decades. So today, myself and my fellow colleague will take you through the concept of reusable centralized web element repository for automation tools, especially UI automation tools. Let's quickly get into the today's agenda. So initially, we will introduce you to some of the key terms such as product delivery management and how the test automation pyramid looks like for enterprise solution. Then we talk about popular test automation tools in the market and their challenges. And we introduce our solution to overcome these challenges and some key takeaways from the today's presentation. How product delivery has evolved or transformed from past few decades. Consider a ERP solution. So such a ERP solution used to take 1 year to deliver the product in the last decade. So due to advancement in cloud technology and also change in business need, this delivery timelines has shrunk from yearly to quarterly to monthly. So this has led to the way for having complete CI/CD pipeline to set up where starting from developer committing the code until the production complete product delivery becomes automated. So with the very short delivery timelines, it is very difficult for any application team to do or meet the quality KPIs with the manual testing. This has led to the way our huge demand of automation. And in the market, there are n number of tools available which does this automation. And over the course of the presentation, we will also take you through some of the popular tools in the market. Now we understood how product delivery timelines has shrinked. It's also important to understand a little bit about how the test pyramid looks like. So the test pyramid starts with static code and it moves up in the hierarchy to the unit testing, component testing, testing, and end-to-end testing. We often observe that more importance is given to the bottom level where we do a lot of component testing and static code testing. But it is also observed that 90% of the end user interactions happens with the UI level. So this definitely will tell why it is important to perform thorough UI testing, and because that is where end user interacts to get the desired results what according to the application what it is developed. On the right hand side, what you see is an illustration of how ERP solutions looks like. So ERP solution comprises of different applications developed based on belongs to different domains. such as finance, CRM, supply chain, HR, and all. One important point also here is that these applications which are developed, when they are delivered as ERP solution, customer gets this solution as a different variants. So if I want to take an example how SAP delivers the cloud products, this application, individual applications are delivered to customer, especially to the cloud customer, with the two different offerings such as private cloud and public cloud. So on top of that, application also can have individual deliveries. So if think of two different solution which is getting delivered to different set of customers, the team which is responsible for testing the quality aspects can tend to use different tools available in the market to perform the automation. So in summary, what I am trying to say here is that individual applications are automated using different tools based on different business needs and based on the different flavors of testing as well. Since we're talking about the test automation tools in the market, we'll also look into some of the popular tools which are available. If I want to name a few, they are Selenium, Catalan, Tricentis, and so on. So it is 100% true that these automation tools will bring in a lot of advantages over manual testing. But if I think from an enterprise solution point of view, it also adds some challenges. So think of the same example which I quoted in the previous slide. If an application is being automated using two or three more tools based on the solution or based on different type of testing needs, in case if application undergoes some change or underlying framework undergoes some change, there is a high chance of maintenance that has to be done at each tool level. It could be adapting the automation script which are created in those tools to cope up with the new changes which has brought in into the application. It also has no reusability aspects or modularization aspects across the tools, whereas testing artifacts of each applications are not stored in a central place. Along with that, certain tools also need some coding skills from end user who is creating the automate, and some of them need some certification also to go through to create the automates as well. Since we are talking about the automation tool, it is also important to know how any tool for that matter identifies the element on any UI screen. Consider this example of sample application called manage sales order. And here we just highlighted some of the properties of input field called sales order. So these properties, when it is rendered in HTML page, it comprises of certain properties such as ID, labels, screenshots, and so on. It might be different for a different tools in which this element is interpreted or identified, but it will be one of these HTML properties or combination of these properties with which individual tools are trying to identify the element during runtime. So what we are trying to say here is that if all these properties are stored in one central place, it could have easily brought down the maintenance aspects as well. So now to sum it up, so we started with seeing how product delivery has reduced from yearly to monthly, and also we saw how what is the importance of UI testing in a test pyramid, available of different tools in the market, and what are the challenges which it brings in terms of high maintenance and less reusability. And also in some cases, it also leads to the integration challenges as well. Now we will see how our solution will help to overcome this challenge. To take us to the solution, I'll just hand it over to Manu.
Awesome. Thank you, Naveen, for giving us an overview of the importance of UI automation and the problems that plague it. Now we look at our proposed solution to these problems. So we intend to group the web elements according to page object model that will classify it at an application level and which will keep it organized and will also improve the reusability of the same. As Naveen had earlier mentioned, we'd be saving HTML properties like IDs, class names, labels, and other framework-related properties and screenshots in our repository. These properties are generic as they are the DOM properties, and these can be relied upon by any of the automation tools. This group central repository will act as a single source for all automation tools used by the entire organization. Uh, the test artifacts will be consumed using a microservice that will facilitate the tool to fetch and update and hence handle the maintenance of the artifacts. And the use of a microservice will also ease the integration of any automation tool with the object repository. We have already patented this concept of having a reusable object repository, which helps in managing and maintaining the test artifacts at a single source. Moving on, we'll take you through the two major flows of our solution. The first one being the test artifact creation and mapping flow, and the other one being the execution and auto maintenance flow. The aim of the mapping flow is to adapt any existing test objects and link them to the object repository. A developer can trigger this adaptation. This will in turn inject the JS API onto the application and using that fetch the required properties and pass it on to the microservice. This will create and update the entries in the object repository and return the primary key mappings. These primary key mappings will basically link the test objects to the object repository, and from this point on, this mapping will be used for the maintenance of the test objects. The second flow, that's the execution and maintenance flow, is when a user triggers and automate. Here, the primary key mappings, which we had mentioned earlier, would be used to fetch the properties from the object repository. And using these properties, the tool would be, executing the automate. Uh, uh, moving on, we'll be looking into the first flow, that is the mapping flow in a little more detail. Here, as we had mentioned, we are mainly focusing on the creation of the automate as well as the mapping of the automate to the object repository. So here, the test tool would inject the JS API onto the application, and using that, it will fetch the properties and return it to the pass it on to the object repository module. The object repository module would do an existence check, and based on that, it will determine if it's a new element or it is already present in the object repository. In both the cases, it will uh, give the mapping back to the test tool. These mappings would be saved by the tool and would be used for further automation. Now we'll be looking at the execution and auto maintenance strategy of ours. So while the organization has the option to manually maintain the repository, we also have an auto maintenance strategy. So during the execution of automates, like we had earlier mentioned, the key mappings will be passed on to the OR object repository module, who will be returning the properties, and using these properties, the test tool would be working with the application to do the automation. But it could be that the control would have changed, or the application would have some major change, because of which the control would not be identifiable using the properties which were fetched from the object repository. So in that case, the test tool would fetch the properties that it had got from the object repository and the screenshot of the application and the current state of the application, and it will pass it on to the JS API, which will pass all this collected information to the object repository module, which has embedded NLP and image processing in it, which will try to find the closest control on the application, which would be the appropriate one for the execution. And once any change is detected on the application, and these changes are cascaded onto the object repository modules, which would maintain the changes into the object repository database, and uh, these changes would be reflecting in all the test objects from this point on. Uh, Now we'll be taking you through the demo of our solution, and Naveen will be taking you through that. Thank you.
Or we also implemented in our automation tool. We want to take you to the short demo where I will just take you um, and will present you that how object repository looks like in picture. So first we'll just consider one application as a sample. So consider this is the application of customer project. Here you can observe some of the interactable elements on the screen. They might be search input, or it might be some buttons at the bottom of the screen, or that can be tab controls. What we are doing for object repository solution, if this particular application is automated in any of the automation tool, all these elements are grouped together under page object model as explained by Manu. So each application will be associated with a unique application identifier, and also each application can also have multiple pages in it. So we are grouping individual controls present in application into a page object model. So Now let's see how the typical representation of object repository looks like. So for this example, I have taken same customer project, and this is how individual elements, which are interactable elements, which are present in the application, are stored in our database. So it will consist of multiple pages which is available in this application, and also list of interactable controls as well. If I want to show how the properties of individual elements are stored, so some of the properties which are highlighted here are such as label, its type, its ID, and all. And we also do store the screenshot of this control so that it can be used for screenshot comparison and in order to identify the element. What is so important to notice here is that individual element will be associated with a primary key called overguide, which is stored in each automation tool when they are authoring that script, which is used to pull these properties at runtime when the execution is happening to, so that all the properties are stored in central place will be given to the individual tools. Now let's move on to one of the tool where we have integrated the object repository solution. So this is the S4HANA test automation tool delivered to SAP S4HANA customers. And this tool is based on record replay approach. And when they are creating the automate, they make use of the APIs that we provided to link the controls to the standard object repository or web element repository. You see on the under UI control type, there is a mapping called standard mapping. So that means the controls which is coming from whatever the controls which are displayed in this automate are mapped to the standard repository, and during execution of the script, this is pulled at the runtime, and the properties of central object repository is used to perform the execution. So I'm just skipping the execution part from this tool because the tool is a completely a SaaS solution, and when I trigger the execution, it happens in the background and provides us the result. To show more of integration with one more automation tool, we have a small illustration in terms of Selenium snippet where we already integrated the object repository as well. So to understand the script, how it was created, this script consists of the object repository mapping where we see the OR GUID, and also it has other properties with which it used to identify the control without having object repository existed in the picture. Now I'll just execute this script and result will be seen in some time. When execution is happening, I would also like to take you through the challenge, through the change which happened for this particular script as well. So there are two changes happened to this particular application from the time the authoring of the script is done. So they are, the first change is the highlighted control, which is a tab control, the label of that control has changed from work item to work package. In this case, our object repository already contains the updated property of this control. Hence, when they try to use the old property to identify the element, the identification fails. And when they try to execute using object repository property, they are able to identify the control and continue with the execution. The next change is kind of a live change, where the change also is not reflected yet in the central repository. So the change is, again, there is a change in the label of this particular add button to create. So in this case, what happens, the property with which the test was created fails to identify the control because there is a change in label and also underlying DOM properties. Even object repository initially will fail to identify this control because this latest change is not yet available in the central repository. In this case, what happens? All the similar controls which are available in this particular app belongs to a particular section are pulled in. The screenshot of all those controls are compared, and whatever the element which gave the highest match will be chosen, and execution will be continued with that. So in this way, even if the change is very new, very latest, with the help of the properties of screenshot comparison, we are able to identify the control and proceed with the execution. As I already mentioned, for the first case, since the repository is already updated, it will be able to identify the control and continue with the execution. Now, maybe we can go back and see the log, whatever the logs which are generated. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll just execute. Maybe the previous execution was not completed. So what it basically does, it executes the script, and it tells us that which property it used to identify the control, and which property, whether it executed with object repository property or it executed with the old properties. So we'll just wait for execution to complete, and we will see through the logs once the execution is done. Maybe in the interest of time, I will take you back to the presentation, then I'll come to the logger part because execution is still happening. So what are the key takeaways from this presentation? So here we have seen why UI testing is crucial, because that is where end user interacts and get the desired output. And we also have seen uh, the problem of having n different tools with which automation is created, and what problem it gives for the enterprise solution. And we also have seen that how our solution of central object repository will help to overcome the challenge of maintaining the test artifact in n number of different tools. So this is uh, all about today's presentation. And we would also like to thank Team QAI for giving us this opportunity to showcase our concept of reusable centralized object repository for UI automation tool.